Fit these pieces together, if you would, and particularly, specifically, how it will affect the economy, the infrastructure, and if it's enacted, Build Back Better.
Well, together, this fulsome agenda that the president has laid out is designed to shore up America's economy. It's going to make these investments that are going to shore up competitiveness for the long haul. It's going to make sure that families can afford the care that they need, so that those adult family members can get to work. And it's going to make sure that we're making those investments so that our economy is sustainable over the long term. I mean, all told, these are the kinds of investments that are going to boost productivity. They're going to make America streets safer, they're going to make it easier to do business across America, and they're going to support American families. So combined, as the president likes to say, we're not just building back from this pandemic. The goal here is to really build back better with a stronger U.S. economy.
So the country's been waiting an awful long time for infrastructure. I think it's fair to say. I mean, really almost decades. So now that we have it, there's an eagerness, I think. When do you think we're actually going to see it hit the street? That is to say, the money actually go out, people being hired for some of these jobs, and see a difference in the economy?
Well, that has already started. The president already appointed Mitch Landrieu to be in charge of executing on the infrastructure pieces. Certainly, the cabinet officials are ready to go to get out there and start those projects. But remember, a lot of this money is going out to states and localities, and there's processes that'll be followed to make sure that those investments really meet the economic needs of communities all across the country. But the president himself is traveling the country this week to talk about investments and where those investments are needed. Yesterday, he stood on a bridge in New Hampshire and talked about how this money is going to go out and make it possible to shore up bridges all across the country. But those decisions on exactly which bridges, that's a state level decision. So we are working as fast as we can to make sure that those funds are available and that those processes are set up, and so that American communities can see the full impact of this really impressive legislation.
When the president set out the initiatives, whether it's infrastructure or Build Back Better, we didn't have the level of inflation we're seeing right now in the economy. This, as you know, is front and center for an awful lot of Americans right now. Does it affect the likelihood of the enactment of the Build Back Better as a practical matter? A lot of Americans saying, we've already spent a lot of money, why should we spend more?
Well, here's the thing. This is not a stimulus package. This is not, neither of these bills, the infrastructure bill or the Build Back Better bill, neither of these are short-term quick hits to the economy. These are long-term investments. So the Build Back Better plan, this is going to make it easier for families to afford really important basics around, child care, pre-K, being able to afford home care help for their aging or disabled loved one. These are things that are actually going to make it, they're going to pull down costs for American families, while at the same time, they're going to make it easier for more people to get to work. Both of those combined are why economists and the rating agencies and so many folks believe that these packages are actually going to do a lot to lower costs and inflation over time, because we're investing in the productive capacity of the United States. So this is the right time to do it. Interest rates are low, and this legislation is fully paid for, and it's the right time to invest in America. So there is not concern that these two pieces of legislation are going to increase inflation in the short term.
So Dr. Boushey, I think you just said something, for me at least, very important, because it is paid for, because those analyses I've seen as well from economists as well as rating agencies say, as long as it's paid for, it will not adversely, to any material degree, inflation. But is that true if it's not paid for? We're waiting for the Congressional Budget Office to score it. What if it comes in and shows it's not paid for? Does that mean we have to cut back on the size of the package?
Well, here's the thing. The White House and the agencies have already spent a lot of time making sure that these policies are paid for. And, the Congressional Budget Office is going to do their analysis as well. But, the thing is that these are investments that are going to take place over time, that are going to lower America's deficits over time, because these are paid for and because these are the kinds of investments that will also pay off. So all of this combined, these really are the right set of economic policies policies for America right now. I mean, you know, the most important thing here is that we need to make sure that we are doing these things now so that we will be competitive, so that we have the labor force we need, so that families have access to the care they need, and so we're making those investments in, you know, innovation in the green economy.
Dr. Boushey, I'm actually getting a question from a viewer right now that I think is a fair question. A lot of the money that was appropriated before in the fiscal stimulus, as I understand, has not actually been dispersed yet. What about the capacity to actually take this money and disperse it? Are we overwhelming the system, whether it's from the initial fiscal stimulus, whether it's from infrastructure or from Build Back Better?
Well, it's a great question because it's about the capacity of the American government to act. So certainly, you know, we have been working, you know, incredibly hard to make sure that all of the funds from the American Rescue Plan got out there and are well spent and are targeted at their purposes. And that is exactly why the president took immediate action to appoint someone to do the same for the infrastructure bill, and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the American people. Again, a lot of the pieces from the package, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that's just passed, these are a part of longstanding programs that'll get money out to states and communities, you know, for transportation or for, you know, other serving other parts of what communities need. And so we are building and developing that capacity where it's needed, but there's also channels through which money has always flown and will continue to flow through.
Let me also ask you about inflation and what, if anything, the White House could do in the short term to alleviate it, because some of these things will kick in down the road. Economists say sooner or later the inflation will go back down. But for a lot of people, spending money in the supermarket or at the gas pump sooner or later is not a good enough answer. What about things like releasing some of the stockpiles from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? What about things like taking off some of the tariffs, things that could reduce prices right now? Are we thinking about that?
Well, certainly, you know, the president has really been focused on these questions. You know, this particular set of challenges with inflation is, of course, related to the pandemic. It all starts there. All the economic challenges that we're seeing sort of in the moment bubbling up, you know, these are rooted in the fact that we are trying to recover from a historic pandemic. That has led to these supply chain challenges, which have then, you know, sort of continued to happen, especially as the pandemic is not contained globally, and our supply chains, of course, are global. And that is why the president has focused so much energy on addressing America's supply chains. So there's, you know, port actions that the president has announced that he is taking. And of course, the actions, you know, on the ports on the West Coast a couple of weeks ago to make it possible for truckers to work longer hours so that we could make sure to unclog those little chinks in the supply chains. All of that is a really important piece of the puzzle. And of course, we're seeing the effects of that. You know, there's been reports from major retailers just today that they are ready for the holiday season. Their shelves are stocked and they're ready to go. We got new advanced retail sales data yesterday that Americans are out there buying more goods. So all of this does point to the fact that, you know, we put the economy on ice during the pandemic. We're bringing it back. We've had some hiccups along the way, but the president has really taken a lot of action to, you know, unclog those supply chains and help Americans get back to work.
I'm so glad you raised the supply chains, because we hear it from company after company after company, issues with supply chains. And I do know that the president has done a lot. People in the White House have done a lot to try to address it. But again, I sound like the kid in the back of the car. Are we there yet? Give me a time horizon. When do you think we'll really see relief? Because we talked to some CEOs that say it'll be at least the middle of next year before we really see relief.
Well, here's the thing. The question that I keep asking, are we there yet, is when will this pandemic end, right? And that's a question that nobody has a clear answer to. You know, we are doing everything we can to get shots in arms and to contain the pandemic, but there lies the answer to making sure that our supply chains function. We need to make sure that supply chains don't experience hiccups because people are out sick. And that is really the crux of the issue here. But we're doing everything we can to help American businesses function, and we need American businesses to step up and do everything they can as well.